First part of the installation will be to remove the rand part from tablet. So we undo the screw mount here and take the tap and unhook the cable and free up the rand, so that's gone. Then the next part will be to go and open up the entire dash, starting with removing the bracket or the brackets here, lifting this part out, undoing some of the screws to take these two dash parts out, then pulling this dash part out, pulling this back, and then opening up the bottom area so we can install the Intellishift module or the OBD2 port for the Intellishift module. So let's start up. Let's start by opening up the dash. Use your screwdriver to pry it open. Good idea is just to store up all the pieces up here by the window. That way it's easy to get at again. Just crack open these little lines. And it should come out nice and easily. Then take these two screws out here. Then you should be able to pop this part off. Just stick your screw inside one of the wedge areas and just pop it up. Eventually it'll give way. And just keep it over here. Then you can start taking some of the screws and opening up this dash part. So now these should be able to come off. Once I take this part out. This should just pop out. opening up the dash over here. Let's see if we can't find a... So basically, next part will be to take out these screws. 1, 2, and that'll free up this whole dash so we can get in behind it. Along with taking this out and opening this up. So once you go in the corner here, put the screw in the corner here so it'll pop it out, and then you'll have access to the screws. Mount should pop right out. Just about. And I usually like to disconnect the little green part. So this little piece here just pops out, and then you can free this whole area so you have a little easier access to push the OBD cabling through. And see, it's coming out. And we want to pop the middle piece out here. So this part needs to go out as well. Next part will be to remove the rand. So what we want to do is follow this cable back, and there should be a couple of connections that we have to undo. You can see here it goes back. We'll have to disconnect the live. This is the live here, which we got a fuse jumper, and we'll just basically snap this off. We have to disconnect the J19s and reconnect them, make sure that the terminator is still hooked up afterwards, and disconnect the ground. And then we'll be reusing that spot for the new Intellishift tablet. Okay, so now I've disconnected the J1939 and reconnected the terminator. I've cut the line for the live, and I'll be unscrewing and disconnecting the ground. The last part of this removal of the rand is to take this piece, the 1802 line, and separate it. You can pull the 1702 line, or whatever it is, the slow bus line, by sticking a small screwdriver into and releasing the latch, and it'll come apart. And there you have it. The rand line has been removed from the truck. Now we get to start bringing out our new connections. Here's the GPS Lockbox power connection. Just put it somewhere on the dash for easy access, along with our little fan power unit here as well. The hope is that we will be putting both units right here in the center area, and then pull the cables out towards the circuit board. And then we can actually use some butt connectors to establish the connections. Just for easiness sake, try and pull the cables so that they only enough can reach where you want the cabling to wind up in the circuit panel, and then tie up this cable so it's a little cleaner, and then you can just keep the extra cabling in this area. Okay, so now I've got my cables all in place. There's one, and where's the other one? Somewhere around here. Oh, there's the other one. Our cabling is in place. I've zip tied the other two so they can go in here, and we're ready to start putting the wires together. Okay, first thing we're going to do is do the wires. This will be our live, which will be going into one of these locations, that constant connection that you need, and we'll be attaching the red lines for both the GPS Lockbox power and the fan power. One of the things you will want to do probably is open up this little sheathing and give you an extra couple inches, as we kind of got a little extra area to cover across here. It'll make it a little easier when you're trying to do the final plugins. So now, as you see, we've taken the constant line out of here, used a butt connector, and put in both of the live red grounds, or red lines, into what's going to be the constant. One thing we have to do is, for the ground, is use a ring butt connector. And notice that you have to be careful where there's a little crimp inside the metal. Make sure that's in the center, otherwise the whole thing will collapse around the wire. So again, make sure that this is kind of being crimped with the key being flat or perpendicular to the actual crimper. And here's where I'm adding some extra wire so that we can reach the actual ground position. Okay, so now we've built our ground line, the two ground lines from the GPS Lockbox and the fan, going into a butt connector, and then just using an extra piece of wire cable, and then going into a butt ring connector. Now off to do the ignition. To complete the ignition connection, we need one of these fuse jumpers, which will go in, and then you have your two fuses that you can add, which we will both fill with 10 amp fuses, which are the little red ones. Okay, one more point to note is that when we are doing the connection for the ignition, so we have our fuse jumper with the butt connector, and then we have the white line, which is the actual ignition from the GPS Lockbox charger. Because it's a thinner wire, we want to cut an extra long one and fold it in half so that it's a little thicker and was more likely to stay. Okay, so now we have all three lines connected. We have our ground with the two lines from the fan and the GPS Lockbox. We have the ignition which is going into a fuse jumper, which is going to go, in this case, F58 on the circuit board. And we have our live, which is going into 10 over by the gray relay over here. Now I just have to shrink the butt connector wrap and we should be good to plug them in. One more point to note is that once you have shrunk the wrap or the butt plastic, make sure there's no exposed metal like this one. If you see such a thing, if I can get this thing to focus. Okay, come on. Yeah, there you go. So if you see something like that, make sure you wrap it with electrical tape so that it doesn't, because metal on metal will arc, and we don't want that. Okay, another point to note is when we are connecting the ground, we will be using a little nut, which will help provide a better connection. So here we have our bolt that we're going to screw in. Take the bolt and put it through the key, or through the ring, like so, if it fits. Put the ring through into the nut like so, and then put the extra washer on the end like this, and then we can actually put it into the back into the ground outlet. When screwing in the ground, make sure you get it fairly tight, because you want a good connection, a good solid metal to metal connection to ensure you have a good ground. Now we will do the live connection. So you just push the thing in. It should just snap into place like that, and then now we put in our ignition, which goes into 58. Okay, so there's 58 right there, right? 57. Oh, that's 58 right there. 58, 59. Like, right, 57, 58. So let's put him in here. There you go.
How you doing?
Getting through it. And there you go. It's all wired up. Here is your live, here is your ignition, and there's your ground. Now on to the Intellishift OBD2 cabling. Okay, so in order to gain access to behind the dashboard, we have to disconnect these two cables and take this mounting piece off, and then we should be able to get in behind the dashboard. Okay, so now I've removed the screws on this one side since we took out the actual panel control, and then this part you just pry out with a flathead screw. And now you can see we have access to behind the actual dash panel. So now we need to remove the screws from the bottom and push this down in order to release this panel and get in behind and access the OBD2 connection. Okay, so we removed the screw, and I'm pushing down the little steering wheel release, and then we will hopefully be able to release the panel. Now that the panel is released, undo these two screws so we can get in behind here and work with the cable a little easier. Now we'll use a flathead screwdriver, and you just pop the OBD connector loose and be able to pull it free. Once it's free, then you want to use a screwdriver control on these inner parts to release the OBD2 tube. Now the OBD2 connector is free. Now we want to put this back through the hole to release it so we can make room for the Intellishift one. Okay, so now we have the truck's OBD2 connector free. Now we get to run this through this point, and round it down through into here. Here you can see I've actually routed behind the ignition column and routed it inside here and then down through the bottom here. Next we will want to connect the truck's OBD2 connector to this one, to the link, and then this will be put into here as the new OBD2 connection. So reclip this back on once you've got the line through, and then you can snap this whole assembly into this square panel. So now you can see I've got the OBD2 line going through the little square receptacle, and now I can put the adapter linkage on. Once it's all snapped together, push it back in, and then the front and rear links should latch up, and you should have a good solid connection to be able to move it back and forth and not have it move. Now we connect the linkage from the Intellishift OBD2 link to the truck's OBD2. Make sure to link up the latch component of this onto the latch receptor on the OBD2 line for the Intellishift. Then somehow, someway, find a way to squeeze all that back in and make this line taut again. Once you have everything back in behind the panel, put the panel back together. So start by putting the mounts back in with the screws, and then push this back in and re-screw it in. Okay, now she's all screwed in and put back together. There we go, and it's OBD2 port still accessible and nice and taut. The next step will be to run the cable through and behind the dash mount. So just push the wire through here. And run the cable behind. And behind the dash mount. And once you get behind the dash mount, go in behind there. Once you've run the line through behind the dash mount and got it into the center section, roll it up in a couple rounds, because you only need the wire to reach right here where the Intellishift module is going to be sitting. So let's tie up a little extra cable and zip tie it. Okay, now I've zip tied my Intellishift OBD2 port cable. We can just run it through, and that part's ready to go. Now we can just reassemble the dash back and put it back together, since we've got the cable going through now. Push the driver's dash back in, make sure it's nice and snug, and put the 4 screws back in. Okay, so now the mount has been put back together, or the dash has been put back together. So next step will be to put our panel back in. Just reconnect the cabling. It should just pop back in, and you push downwards on the top area, it'll just snap in place and push it up. And then now you can put your starter ignition paneling back in, hopefully. And once all that's in place, replace the screws here and then put the bracket back on. There, put the bracket back on. You saw it the first time. Okay. Okay, screws are back in. Now it's time to slide the paneling back in. Make sure you line up your little doohickey here. Push it back, and all of the little things should pop into place. Make sure it's nice and taut, and we're good. Okay, next step is to put the Intellishift module in, which will go in here. Okay, here we're going to, this is the module for Intellishift. We make sure that the truck number matches, make sure the white portion with all these little barcodes is pointing upwards so that it has access to see the sky. We'll be putting it inside here, this location, so that it can have easy access to the window. Plug in the port like so. You'll see some red and green lights initially, and then as it boots up, hopefully it goes to a green. Okay, here we go. So got the Intellishift communication module all wedged in there. Tried to, and zip tied in. Just do the best you can with what's around there. Sometimes it can be a little hairy. And and just wrapping the zip tie around the chassis of the electric components. Okay, and next will be see if we can get the tablet connected. Okay, so now we've got the tablet in position. I'm just undoing this is the USB power cable. We're going to run through and make sure it has external access and try and connect up that part. Okay, so now I've run the power cable through the center, through the inside of the dash, and out this access point on the panel. So now we've got this done. We should make sure we electrical tape these two together so that if it does shake and whatnot, we don't lose the connection. Okay, so now we have our little connectors all taped up. Now we can pull it back and try and loosen or get rid of any extra cable and zip tie it. Okay, so that's all zip tied up now, ready to be shoved in the middle. Last part should be that we have to run this ribbon cable through that same port in here, run it back to and connect to our fans power module and click it into here. And when connecting it, make sure that you got the little latch on the top so that they all line up and click in. Now we can start putting the dash back together. Line up your heating vent and push this in and line it up, and then start screwing in the dashes again. The dash components have been pushed back in. Now we can start putting the mounting screws back in. One last test before we put the whole dash back together. Make sure the car is turned or the truck is turned on. Hold the power button for about 5 seconds and you'll see it start up, and you'll see the Galaxy and see the tablet start up. Make sure that you can see that the tablet is charging. If you need to, it goes to sleep, and if you need to wake up, you just press the power button again, and make sure press the power button again, and then once you want to open it, swipe up. You can see that the thing's charging, and then we can do the start SP logbook. Allow all the time. Okay, you punch in the DOT number. In this case, this is a food grade truck, so it's 3003 258. Done. So now and then sign in with your driver. That's actually supposed to be in here, so 2095 for this one, and hit done. And hopefully it will be trying to find the 2057, which is what was the module we installed. It's using Bluetooth to try and talk to it. So saying it's discovered 2057, so select it as the truck that you're talking to for this application, and you are in. So it's charging. We're able to find the Intellishift module. So now we just do the final cleanup and we are done. Put all of your zip tied pieces back under in the center area, and then you can close up the whole dash. Once the dash is mounted or lined up, then you can press it into place, restore the screws. Once the screws have been restored, then put the brackets back in. So put the longer bracket in place. Once the long bracket is back in place, put the other bracket in place. Now you can put the tablet back up onto the RAM mount. Now just clean up and you are finished. That is everything you need to know about installing a Intellishift mount or Intellishift system. I hope it goes easy for you. If not, give me a shout. Thanks and goodbye.